Hi there, everyone. So, I have a few friends that are interested in drawing, and so I wanted to just create an all-in-one tutorial, like a one-stop shop for gaining knowledge on how to get decent at drawing. So, I'm not talking about being a professional or being so amazing as like your favorite artists or anything like that, or things you would see on Instagram or in popular culture or anything. I just want to be able to get you started and get you to a point at which you feel confident and no longer anxious about drawing, and so that you feel like you have enough information. And from that point, you can go out to any piece of information that other people are giving to you, and you can just add bits and pieces. So I want to keep this as efficient as possible. So I've written up a few things at the start here just to get going, because when you're learning, it's um, it's usually pretty good to just do things pretty quick initially, just to give you an outlook, because you don't have a lot of ability to handle the frustrations and the difficulties that come with learning or come with that skill set. So it's kind of like boring to listen to someone drone on. So I just want to do this super quick. So uh, this is going to be an all-in-one tutorial. So from the start, I'm going to start with the things that you start with, and then I'm going to move through those, and then we're going to get to more advanced ideas as I keep talking. Uh, so the first thing to do when you're getting started is just setting your goal. So, what is the main thing that you want to be doing from drawing? For some people, it's relaxation. Some people, it's creating more. Other people, it's the greater understanding and appreciation of art. So, for myself, it was to create more. That was my goal, and that was the point of it, so that I could so that I could create stories and then make them into manga or something like that. So I wanted to create more. Now, for other people, it might be that they like the idea of having something to relax with. And that's a super big part of drawing and painting. And you may want to, if you're a relaxation type, go into painting, sculpting, um, that kind of thing, just to add that extra relaxation. Um, if you're thinking of creating more, you might have to go into a bit of storytelling, a bit of directing, um, and understanding of design. If you just want a greater understanding and appreciation of art, you will have to do some things like, um, well, any of those, to be honest. You just look through them, understand them, and bring them into your your art and your artistic understanding. Look at things and see how they're done and start to break them down. That'll be part of the mental part of art and drawing that I'll explain in a bit. But essentially, look at the benefits that exist in drawing and then just set up your goals. Just something realistic, and understand that for everything that you want to learn, there's going to be a level of frustration involved. And so, in order to counteract that frustration, you have to be really invested, really energized, and really enthusiastic about what you're doing, or it has to be something that you really enjoy. So, make sure to set goals that you know that you can enjoy along the process of frustrations, obstacles, and challenges. So once you've set realistic goals, which can take you a few weeks to kind of get an understanding of that, just take time, understand those, get some ideas of benefits, and some of these benefits will expand as you go on. All right. The next thing that you want to do is you want to get your equipment and your software. So your equipment might be just like uh, pencil and paper, or initially, or it might be a cheap um, drawing pad. And if you do get a drawing pad for your computer, once you plug it in, also go to the website to download the drivers. So generally, you look at what kind of model the tablet is, then you look up drivers for that tablet, install those. Otherwise, all the drawing features won't work properly. You'll just get like things that look like you're drawing in Paint, and it'll be like using a mouse rather than using an actual tablet. As for software, there are usually a few different ones. There's Procreate, I think, for like iPads and so forth. That's pretty popular. I'm on Clip Studio, um, which is paid. I pay for this one. And then there's Adobe as well. Whatever, there's also some free ones out there. So whatever your software is, install that. Just take a look at a few simple um, paint brushes or pens or something to use to get started, and don't do anything too complex. Just learn how to create a new file, folder, whatever, and so that you can get started on that kind of thing. Okay, so once you have your equipment and your software, then you want to understand a little bit of a realistic outlook on drawing. So what is a realistic outlook? Realistic outlook comes in two forms. So the time frame of learning something and what you can achieve in that time frame with that kind of effort and so forth. So one thing that I want to make extensively clear is that if you are drawing from reference, this means that if you are drawing from something that you can look at and see, so I don't know, there might be a model posing and they might have like, I don't know, a look on their face and maybe they're, I don't know, uh, doing something, I don't know, whatever that is. So there's a model posing, and then you have your canvas and you're going to do what you're doing on the canvas. Copying something one to one is actually one of the easiest parts of drawing. So if you're going to look at something and then you're just going to draw it, it's actually, that's something you can realistically achieve within a time frame of about 3 months, or even 1 month if you were super, super efficient with it. So it doesn't take forever to be able to learn what most people think of as the epitome of drawing. They think that the big challenge of drawing is being able to copy things from real life, and so forth. But it's actually one of the easiest things to learn how to do. What is much harder is to draw from your imagination. So drawing from whatever's in your mind. Generally, what happens is you might have an image or a feeling or some sort of creative idea in your mind, and getting that out of your mind and onto the paper, that is what's the greatest challenge for most artists. So even artists that can draw something exquisitely well, they're going to have challenges in getting something from their mind to paper the way that they view it. So I recently watched Dune 2, and it's an incredible artistic movie. Like it's done really well, directed amazingly. And Danny Villeneuve, the director, he um, says that he feels uncomfortable about some of the scenes because they're not like how he had them in his head, and so he has to get used to that. While some of them were exactly as he wanted in his head, and he's completely happy with those. So you're going to have a percentage of how much of a drawing is just like you imagined it, and a percentage that is something else. And depending on what you really want to be doing, um, that scale of how much is your imagination and how much is just directly from reference is going to change. So the very first thing you want to gain is this reference ability. And then the very last thing that you want to attain is this from imagination ability. And that is basically how you would want to simplify an understanding of art and how difficult certain things are. Um, okay. All right. So, okay. So that's a realistic outlook is looking at the things that you want to gain. So a lot of people will assume that hyperrealism is very difficult. That is going to be much easier. There is actually another thing that I should explain. So you you have copying of dimensions, like, oh, okay, the box is like this wide and this whatever. And if you can, you know, copy the same dimensions, the same sort of whatever, this is probably the simplest skill. The second is maybe complex structures. So say something has like a curve like this and a curve like this, right? Then to be able to do a similar kind of thing in a complex structure, this is going to be a little bit harder. Um, then eventually you get up to things I would call rendering. So rendering is probably the harder part of copying, which is, I don't know, there might be a specific sort of gradient on something like a light source. I don't know. What is this? Like a ball, and there's like a shadow. These shadows or colors or gradients and things of this nature, getting a perfect render to make it look the way that it actually looks is going to be the harder thing to copy. Um, like, because there's just way more ways for you to change and alter it because it's so hyper specific. So your rendering is going to be harder, but your direct transference is going to be much easier. Um, so yeah. All right. All right. So that's basically everything at the start. Um, and what I want you to understand here is that there are both physical and mental techniques to drawing. So the physical is rather simple. That is about how your arm moves and how your uh, and most of the movements that you're using to draw are actually just very fine muscle movements in your shoulder blade. So you might be like, why would it be my shoulder blade? That doesn't make any sense. Well, your biceps are really big muscles, your triceps are really big muscles, your forearm muscles, they just basically rotate um, the wrist, and the other forearm muscles, they just move your fingers. Now, with drawing, it's not necessarily about moving your fingers. If you were to write things like A, B, C, D, or whatever, this is using your fingers. But when you're drawing, it's a different skill set than writing. Writing is just using your fingers, but drawing is using your wrist for like small curves and things like this. This is from your wrist. And then there are bigger curves using, say, your shoulder. So, well, people say your shoulder, but it's actually your shoulder blade. There are these muscles. Think of your shoulder blade like an oyster. There are kind of muscles on the top, muscles on the bottom, and they rotate the arm. And they also lift the arm up and lower the arm. So, like, lift it up and lower the arm. That is muscles on the shoulder blade that do that. Also, things that go this way, things that go that way, they are muscles on the back of your shoulder blade. So if you're picking up groceries or things like that, you'll feel like your blades lock in and tense. And basically, it's those muscles. Those are the only muscles that change where your hand is moving in space. So if you're doing like the Macarena or something, or you're doing a dance and your hands are moving around, that's actually muscles on your shoulder blades moving. So shoulder blades look a little bit like this. Let's say this is the left shoulder blade. Um, uh, there is a spine along this part of the shoulder blade. There is a muscle here on top, and then there are muscles here on the bottom. And so when this muscle contracts, there's like a shoulder girdle, and say your bone here. This muscle is attached to the top of the bone here, and so are these muscles. So these ones will rotate, like these ones will rotate the arm outwards, and this one up here will rotate it like the other way, like a wing. So it's going to rotate it in different ways. And so these muscles are basically the major muscles that do drawing, um, which a lot of people don't understand, but is specifically important when we get to explaining what physical technique is and then how we're going to drill physical technique so that you understand the muscles you're using and how to do specific physical techniques so they are as good as they can be and you have as much control as any other artist that's picking up a brush. Because you can gain that control within a week or so, and then it's just very slight improvements that come after that as you develop as an artist. So you can develop very fine and very good muscle control very, very quickly and gain a lot of good physical technique starting out super rapidly. And that's super important if you want to be able to copy one to one, learn those early skills quick, fast, and well, and do so in like a quick time frame. And I believe that's valuable for everyone. So I'm going to go over those in the next page. Okay. The next thing is mental technique. Mental technique is things such as training your eye. So you've got to train your eye, which is just about training what you can perceive and looking at things and being able to break them down into their different components. Um, that is understanding different lines that things have, the angles those lines have, the shallowness of curves. So like how shallow a curve is or how deep a curve is, like a shallow curve, a very deep curve, right? Um, and lines, like, oh, how many lines are there? Or how slanted is the angle of this line? Being able to read those things, understand the curves, being able to understand composites. So, uh, what is it? So say you have a line and then it curves, and then maybe it curves back again. So you might have a line and then it curves back like that. So being able to observe things and understand how they're moving and adjusting is super important in training your eye mentally. The other things are forms. So understanding forms, and this is a technical term in art, which is like boxes. Boxes are forms because they're three-dimensional. Spheres are forms. So like if you have a sphere or whatever, that's a form. If you have like a cone, that's a form. If you have like a cylinder, that's a form. Okay, so anything, looking at anything and saying, oh, this is basically a cube, this is basically a sphere, this is basically a cone, this is basically a cylinder. Knowing and identifying forms in real things is super important because, say, for example, you say, hey, this car is like actually it's mostly an oval sort of tic-tac shape, and then we can carve out of it this specific wedge here, and we can remove that wedge, and then we can say, oh, okay, then there's a wedge here, which we can remove out of that, and we can cut that out. then we've got this other part. You can start creating the construction of whatever that object is, because you understand the forms, and then you can subtract or add different forms to it to put it together. And so if you can break things apart into their forms, into their lines, into the angles, into the curves, into the composites that they have, you can then work your way around something, understanding what it is. And this is what is called training your eye. Basically, you just want to be able to understand what it is you're actually drawing so that you can add and subtract different parts, different curves in a controlled way. You're not trying to do what I would call printed style drawing, which is the thing that you really want to avoid. So print drawing is, say you see something like, I don't know, looks like a smiley face or whatever, and you look at that and you very slowly follow with your eyes. You look at the thing and then you look back to what you're doing, and then you look at the thing and then you look back to what you're doing. You look at the thing, you look at what you're doing, and you're slowly dragging your hand, and you're like, oh no, I haven't quite got it. Okay, whatever. And then you're like, oh, maybe it's in this position, and then it's in this position, and then this thing, it goes down, and then it goes across, and then it goes up. Don't print draw like that. Don't use things and just start drawing like that. That's how people that don't know how to draw. What you have to do when you draw is you have to do strokes, meaning you do a circle, you do a circle, you do a circle. Okay, you're not doing that circle right. You have to learn how to then do that circle right. So you'll be like, okay, I'm not getting that circle right. So how do I get that circle right? And then you can get that circle right. It's just going to take you a few times to get it right, if that makes sense. So don't do this. It's insecure and it's a way to draw. You're not going to be able to draw anything that way. Um, make sure that you use strokes. Okay, so that's what I'm going to start teaching you here. I'm going to start with two simple, like the simple drills that you need to start with. But before I do that, so we're going to go over the physical technique, then we're going to go over some mental technique, which is, like I said, observation. There are a few other mental techniques that are important, but for now, just think of it as physical technique is using the right muscles to create strokes, and mental technique is using your eyes to capture the information that you need to transfer. Okay, so. So this is about info, and this is actually about strokes, and it's about forms as well, but strokes, forms, so on, um, and being able to do those and replicate those the way that you want them. So we're going to go into that now, and I'm going to show you the drills that you want to be doing, you want to be starting with. Another thing is hopefully you're able to do this benefits thing, see what your goals are so that you can do those, get your equipment set up properly, and just have a realistic outlook on what you're going to be able to learn initially, which is you're going to be able to learn that copy drawing rather than the imaginative drawing, which is going to come later and is going to come from a lot more deeper understanding and appreciation of more facets of things. You also want to understand that you want to keep things as interesting as possible. So you're going to be looking into all different kinds of art over your time learning, and they're all going to have interesting things to say and interesting things to tell you, and you're going to be able to appreciate different things from all of them. And so if you're looking just to draw, understand that painting, sculpting, animation, fashion, all these things, they're going to help you draw better. by understanding them and appreciating them. And it's just like this. There's different fruits that you can put into your fruit salad to just really enjoy it. So that's one of the fun things to look forward to in any art form that you're doing, is that there's so many different aspects to it that can really enrich it, really help you understand what you're doing. And so even though I'm just going to be talking about some boring physical technique here and some boring mental technique stuff initially, that is going to help you get the starting blocks from which you can develop everything else and get super excited about things. Okay, so let's go on to physical technique. The very first thing that I want you to do is to focus on a horizontal line. So what you want to do here is, if we have a figure, let's just say there's a figure who's drawing, and normally your arms sort of hang down in a pose like this, right? Well, what I want you to do is, for drawing a horizontal line, your elbow needs to come into the side of your ribs. Why does it need to do this? Say you've got like a hand here or whatever. If you're right-handed, what I want you to do is I want you to start from the right side and move to the left. If you're left-handed, move from the left side to the right. And I'm left-handed, so I'm going to do these on the left side, but if you're right-handed, do them on the other side. Okay, so I'm left. What I want you to do is just control one stroke, which is the horizontal stroke. And this horizontal stroke will be, your elbow is nice and in tight. This is because there's a very small muscle on the shoulder blade that controls putting your elbow in that tight. And when your elbow is in that tight, the shoulder blade will only really, it'll be locked into a groove, which will basically make it so that you can't make errors. You're just going to create a stroke. And I want you to create like a mid-length stroke, and then sort of longer length strokes. And you want to do it so that it's nice and sort of quick, kind of clear, and has like a rhythm. And once you're comfortable doing that, I want you to do it back and forth. So one that way, 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 so that you get kind of a rhythm, and a kind of a flow to that stroke. You don't want to be going like this. If you've got these multiple bumps, you're not doing strokes, you're doing the kind of printed drawing, all right? So you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And you can do it backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just making sure that you're keeping your elbow in and you can control it, you're controlling that. The next thing I want you to do is, after you've done that for a while, like take 5 minutes, spend some time on it, all that sort of thing, is I want you to do an up and down stroke. So the up and down stroke isn't done with the elbow in. What it's done with is your shoulder, the actual tip or point of your shoulder, should come forwards. So if a person is normally like this, the shoulder will come forward a little bit to like here. So the shoulder angle that you have will change. And with your shoulder forwards and your elbow in a natural position, do an up and down stroke. The reason you do it with your shoulder forward is your shoulder position is going to change the angle of your stroke quite a bit. And so if your shoulders are flat, that's going to help you draw much straighter. But if your shoulder comes forward and then okay, so if your elbow is in, you're going to draw more flat. If your shoulders are back, you're going to draw more flat. If your elbow is out in a natural position and your shoulder is forward, in a forward position, you're going to draw more vertically. Okay? So you want to understand that you have those ways to control it. Of course, you could do it by just putting your elbow up a lot as well. That's another way that you can create a horizontal line. If you had like flat shoulders, you could put your elbow up quite a bit and do it that way, or you just tilt your shoulder forward a bit and then just have a natural position, and then you just do strokes. Get a nice rhythm, get a nice tempo, get a nice long length to it. You can try some middle lengths, and then you can try some long lengths, and just find what's comfortable there. So that way you're doing horizontal and you're doing vertical. And if you just practice this horizontal vertical, that's a good practice exercise just to get you started, just so that you have muscle coordination. This is your elbow coming in, right? And your shoulders being sort of flat and level to your drawing instrument. Then you put the shoulder forward and the elbow in a natural position, and then you can do these up and down strokes. Okay? So that said, we're going to go on to some other ones. So there is a natural stroke, which is a 45-degree stroke. This is, I'm left-handed, so that's why mine is this way. If you're right-handed, and I'm switching to my right hand here, is your natural stroke will be this way. And so that's going to be your right-handed. Your natural stroke is going to be 45 degrees. This is just because when you contract like the muscles and there's no other sort of thing adding to it, your arm is just rotating and it just rotates on this plane. So it's really handy. Everything that's kind of like a 45-degree angle is going to be your easiest stroke that you can possibly do. I'm going to switch to my right hand here. And yeah, you can just do the same thing as we did before. Make sure you get a nice good rhythm. This is just relaxed. Your shoulders are level. Your elbow isn't in at your waist. It's just hanging in a relaxed sort of Y pose. So for example, here, your arm's just in this position. So it's just hanging naturally. It's not sticking in here. It's not pulling up here. It's just in a natural spot where you're just looking and you're just drawing. So you can always start with 45-degree angles. They're just super simple, and so on. The next angle that we will do is the opposite of that, which is one of the harder angles to do. So I'm left-handed and I'm doing it this way. This is with my shoulders are flat, but what I'm doing is I'm lifting my elbow up quite a bit. So my elbow's in a really up position, and that allows me to get over the top of what I'm doing. Or so for right-handed, if I'm doing that, I get over the top of it. Whoa. My body's twisted, so I can't really do it that well with that one. But you get your elbow over, and that gets you your diagonal movement. So, if you're right-handed, you're starting from here. You could do an up-down stroke, do your natural strokes, and then come over the top doing those other strokes. And as you can see, you're getting a full range of all the different angles. You're getting this 45-degree angle, you're getting an up and down angle, you're getting this over the top angle, and you've got that flat angle as well. So these are the basic ones that you want to be able to control and you want to be able to understand. Like you want to understand the physical position that you use for each one. And that's just going to basically make it so that you have control over the muscles and the rhythm that you're using for these lines. And to practice this, just Don't use your fingers, just lock your fingers in place, lock your wrist in place, and just make sure that you're using the rotation of your arm, which is going to be coming from the back of your shoulder blades. All right, so once you have this, you can further control this so that you have, like I do, I call this A1, I call this A2, I call this A3, I call this B1, B2, B3, and then I have like, what is it? I have like C1, C2, C3, C2, C3, and then I have D1, D2, D3, and then I have E1, E2, E3. So just controlling this many spokes allows you to, when you do look at things and you're like, oh, wow, what is that thing? And you're like, oh, that allows you to be able to say, okay, this is just an A1 angle, this is an A2 angle, this is like a B2 angle. Like, oh, B2 is just me going as 45 degrees. You can use whatever notation you want. I'm just showing as an example. I have like these mental notations. They help me be able to look at something in real life and then know its angle just based on me using these lines, like these ones, these ones, these ones. You could say, you could just do it with these and just say, oh, so this first quarter or this second quarter, this third, like whatever your notation is, use yours. You don't need to copy anyone else. But then you could just say like, oh, it's a half of that first quarter, or it's a third of that first quarter, or it's a quarter of that first quarter, so that you understand angles in a way that's related directly to how you would draw them. Then you can basically look at something and say, oh, okay, that's that angle, and I'll just use that angle. And so that way you can train observation into how you're physically drawing technically. So these are obviously just straight lines. You're not only going to have straight lines, you're going to have curved lines. And curved lines come in two qualities, which is you have clockwise and you have anti-clockwise. Now you'll notice I didn't do this part or this part. I'm left-handed, so for me, my spots are here and here. If you're right-handed, if I do that, it's going to be and it's going to be so this is going this way. What was this? This was going this way. And for this one, I went this way. And for this one, I went this way. So basically, you're not going to have 360 degrees with your wrist movement or even with your arm movement, with your shoulder blade movement. You're going to miss a portion of this circle or this curve, and this is natural. This is completely normal. You shouldn't be looking to control the whole circle. You can, if you get focused or whatever, and you really focus on it, but it's very tricky. This last part will always be a bit like a tightrope walk, and it requires a lot of balance of like different muscles. So instead of it being a very simple thing where you just like run across because there's like a groove allowing you to do it, it's going to be a bit more complex. Another thing you want to understand is size. So small circles are going to be done with your fingers. Larger circle, like medium circles, they're going to be done with your wrist. And larger circles are going to be done with your shoulders and your arm. So the rotation of your arm and shoulder blade is going to be doing this. So this is going to be the shoulder blade. So if you have something that's a specifically large curve or it's a shallow large curve, this is a combination of a line and the rotation from my shoulder. So my shoulder blade or something like this, and then I'll just extend it with a line. right? And then depending on tempo, you can have it like, okay, so this curve's happening, and then like I'll drag the line into this part. So combinations of lines and circles are what's going to create most of your curves, like shallow curves, and also narrow curves. So for example, if I'm going to create a curve that has a big, like comes out like this, what is it? Comes out like this. I'm going to have to do like a line up and a line back as I'm doing like a curve like this. So this line is actually this and this, if that makes sense. So your combinations are just going to be like, oh, am I going to do this clockwise? Am I going to do this anti-clockwise, or am I going to do it clockwise? And to complete this, I'm going to do the opposite side um, so that it completes. And yeah, that's basically it. So if you're doing an oval, for example, this is just a circle. You just do, what is it? A circle, but you're adding like a little bit of a line in there so that it extends the focal points of the circle back like this. So that's how you create an oval. So this should help you understand how all this stuff functions. So, you know, fingers for smaller stuff, wrist for pretty small stuff, but you know, whatnot, and shoulder for much larger stuff. There's even body stuff if you're painting on a full length canvas. So you might be like swaying back and forth, or like using your hips to sort of duck and weave to kind of create larger things. But most people, they're not going to do that. You can't do that on a tablet or something like that. So with this in mind, where we've just done the angles, where we've done straight across, we've done straight up, we've done down here, and we've done this overhanding angle. Sorry, I'm left-handed. Let's do the right-handed one. So across, up and down, natural angle, and then the overhand angle. Yep. And this is what you'll probably start like, okay? And then you want to get more like this. Um, it's just controlling like different parts of your body so that it's nicely set. Um, once you have this kind of thing and you're feeling pretty confident with it, and you've got like your circles, like small circles, and sort of your medium circles or whatever, and you've got like your larger circles, then what I want you to do is I want you to start combining these a little bit. So you'll have like a straight across, but maybe you put like a little curve in it. Or maybe you put like a smaller curve in it. What am I doing? This, maybe. Or like this, maybe. Yeah, okay. So you added like a tiny curve or a little medium curve into just like a straight across motion, and say you're coming down, maybe you're going to come down with like a little bit of wrist motion, or maybe you're going to come down with like a shoulder motion, or maybe you're going to come down and just like little finger motion. So you want to understand what muscles you're using to do which curves and which lines so that you have that control. Um, Also, if you're going to draw smaller, you want to not be doing a line super fast. You want to probably slow that down so that you're using a shorter stroke. And then that can help you control um, how you're doing that curve. So for example, if I'm doing a curve like the side of a face or something, it's going to typically be faster over the longer part of the curve than it is over the shorter part of the curves. So you might want to slow down in order to do like little turns like this or little transitions. Um, now, now that you understand that, what I want you to do is an exercise I call the racetrack. This is a simple drill. And the reason I'm not getting you to copy like a simple cartoon or something like, oh, there's a duck and you draw the duck with a 4 and then a 7 and a 2 or whatever. I don't know how to draw a duck with numbers, but the reason I'm not telling you to do that is because that's stuff you already know. What we want you to be doing is learning how to control your drawing abilities in ways that you don't know yet, but are really, really simple. And then we'll sort of curve this back like this, and then maybe curve this up like this, and then to here. Okay, so that's the end of the racetrack. What I want you to do when doing this racetrack exercise, you can create any racetrack that you like, with as many curves and combinations as you like. This is just about combining the skills that you've gained. So gauging, for example, the distance of this line, and the curve of this line. So whoop, and then here allows you to understand that curve, right? So let's do this with blue or something, and you just simply go through this. You think in your mind, okay, and then I get to this turn, and I'm going to have to. So this is a shoulder forward position. Then this one here, I rotate. I'm going to be rotating anti-clockwise. Then I go, this is like an elbow up position for me. And then I'm going to have to rotate. And then my shoulders are going to have to change position and I'm going to have to come down. It's actually not simple. So if you're using strokes rather than like printer, if you're doing a printer thing and you're doing this and you see all these wobbles in the line, that's a fail. You don't want wobbles in the line. So you want to come down, you want to turn, you want to come up, you want to go across, around, through and up. So that's essentially what you want to just train so that you can go down, turn, up, down, up, and then turn and up. And see, I'm hitting walls here, so that's not too good. But basically, you go through, down, up, turn. There we go. Made it through that time. So you're controlling your mind to think ahead of what you're doing and to plan the lines that you draw. So for example, if you're drawing a face, this is the line contour of like a face. Like here's an eye socket, here's an eyebrow, here's the cheekbone. And say if you're going like that for the jaw or whatever. So like obviously that's pretty terrible, but you know, you're going to be doing something that's similar to those line combinations. And these line combinations, say like there's hair or something, maybe you're going to be doing a specific set of line combinations and you're like, oh, when I draw the hair, I want these line combinations to work this way. And so being able to plan ahead and think ahead and then draw with strokes is going to allow you just to repeat that process as much as you need in order to get the thing that you wanted to get. Okay. So this racetrack is probably the ultimate thing that you want to be working up to. Otherwise, you just want to be doing the kind of doing that star control and then like controlling, you know, different curves off of that, you know, so that you can control your curves, control your angles before you even get to them. So you can create a racetrack that's straight lines, you know, to practice your straight lines, or you can do one that's really, I don't know, curved so that you can do that and then, whoa, I have to go through this. There we go. I've made it through my racetrack. So do that, learn these, and that is the basis of the early part of just physical control. This should take you about 1 week to learn how to do this properly and as good as anybody else. Some people are going to be slightly better than you at that, but that's okay. Don't worry about that. You'll get better over time, and it's not that crucial of a skill because you can just repeat those lines until you get them right. The other thing that I want you to understand is now that we've done that, we've done strokes, we want to do what is essentially a bit more of a mental exercise, which is the forms. So with this, what I want you to do is just very simply create yourself a box, and then I want you to just create more lines off of that box to create, you know, a simple form. This is from you looking on top because you can see the top part of it. If you're to draw the box again in a different way, how would you draw it if you're going to look from underneath it? You're going to, I don't know, see underneath it like this. Say if you're right in front of it, you're not going to see the sides, right? You're just going to see underneath the box. If you're looking at the side of the box from directly the side of it, let's say we've got this here, and you're just looking directly from the side of the box, you're going to get something like this, right? So just control looking at a box and just saying, okay, my eye level is here looking down on this box. My eye level is here looking from the right of this box. My eye level is below the box, so we're looking up on it. So just think of your eye, where your eye level is, then think of the simple form shape, and then draw it. So that's a simple box. Now let's think of a simple sphere. So let's say our eye, where our eye is like, I don't know, let's say the sun is up in the sky. So that's going to help us understand how we're drawing a sphere. I don't know what I'm doing with that line. We don't need that line. That's dumb. It's just going to confuse you. Okay, so if the object is above us, we're going to be seeing quite a bit of the shadow side underneath it, right? If we're right on the side of, like right next to it, this sunlight might be getting most of this. Actually, and if we're on top of it and it's below us, maybe we barely see any of that and we see more like the shadows underneath the object. So here, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's shadows there. Maybe here there's like lesser shadows, and here it's just like some dark shadows. So thinking of where the light source is coming from, maybe you can look at like, oh, we're looking down on this ball, so our eye line's up here. We're looking sort of straight at this ball, so the light source is manipulated that way. We're looking from underneath this ball, so we're seeing a lot more of the dark side because the light is at the top. So think of your eye level. And if you're thinking of if you're using shadows, then think of like the light source and so on, related to the eye level. And that will help you understand a bit more about spheres, how to draw spheres. That's kind of a crappy lesson, but it's also interesting. So then you've got like triangles, and you can do all kinds of different things with triangles. Like it could be a triangle prism, right? And different objects in the world are going to have like these different shapes. And maybe what you want to do is you want to start combining those shapes into different things. Like you're like, oh, okay, let's create I don't know, a dollhouse or something. And so you create your shape and you're using two different forms connected together. And maybe what you'll do is you'll subtract a form from this going like, oh, well, let's subtract this part and then show this angle, and then maybe all of this is in shadow or something. Okay, so you've just subtracted that that little form from it, and or you might like add a little form across here or whatever, and yeah, you can just add and subtract forms from anything that you're drawing, and then you just consider what angles you're using. So say this one, I didn't consider the angles. Let's say I want to draw this same object, but I want to do it at 45 degrees. Then I'm like, okay, how long is this line? It's like that long, and then that, and if I have to do that, then I'm going to have to do sort of this line like this, and then I don't know how across is this line. This, this, right, and then this, and then with this one's just going to go like, how long is this line? We've got to go like here, so it's like a bit back, and so on. And how far does this go back? This goes across from here, and it kind of takes this angle like this, and like this, and then whoop. I didn't quite get that right, but whatever. You get the point. Is if you're drawing something, you should also be able to just kind of change this angle or change this angle however you like, so that you can re-represent that form and just be drawing it at different angles. And this is just like, this is a specific length, these are specific angles from each other, and if you know how to do this, 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 um, same with curves, you should be able to also start to manipulate objects, just so that you can control, you know, the rotation of a box or something like that. So it might be here, and then you can slowly start rotating it, or maybe we're slightly above it so we can see like a little bit at the top of that thing, and then maybe you'll start going underneath it. So you do similar length lines, and then this is just going to come down and there, and like this, and then this one's going to come across like this. So now we're looking from underneath it rather than over the top of it. So we're just changing the eye line level from here to just underneath it. And understanding eye line or eye level when you're drawing 3D objects is super important. And then you just think about these objects and how they're rotating. Now, when you're going to be copying something, say there's a person and they're, I don't know, standing a specific way. Let's say like a Marilyn Monroe type thing. Uh, and say you're gonna be copying the Marilyn Monroe type thing. Now, their arms are going to be constructed of cylinders, right? Maybe a little ball socket there, and then like a tapering cylinder into the wrist. And you just want to think, okay, where's my eye level? My eye level's at the same height as them, or maybe a little bit above. So whenever you're drawing these things, you just want to keep that in mind, like that you're probably above. So you're probably going to see more of the above part of this shape. But let's say, yeah, let's do it that way so that we can see a bit of that. See the top, and whoop. So this is just constructing the object that you're drawing by creating a form So this one's going to be much shallower. So if we've got like this chest thing right there, and I don't know, hips. And then we've got like these cones, these cylinders or whatever. These, we should technically be a little bit above it. All right, so, and then this be above that. And then you can just draw the construction. Like, oh, here's a cylinder here. If you can draw the basic construction of a thing, whoop, and you can rotate that, then you can start getting much better at copying things. So if someone's done, like there is someone posing there or whatever, you can copy those things because you know the angles and you know like, oh, okay, so this is just a wedge with their foot. And this is a wedge, but it's rotated in a different angle. And so I can just do that one. And I don't know, so their head is comprised of a few different things. Like there's the eye sockets, and then there's the back of the jaw, there's the side of the head and the cheekbone, and then that goes into the back of the head, and so you're like, okay, and then we've got the crown of the head, which is going to be twice the size of that, and then you can start sculpting and adding different forms. So let's say we're drawing a face. The face is just a series of forms added onto each other or subtracted from each other. So let's say the eye line about at the middle or whatever, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to subtract the eye socket. And then, oh, I'm going to add the eye, which is basically going to be a ball that fills most of the socket. And then, there's muscle and skin that goes over this or whatever. And say the eye is like usually, there's a few different rules with the eyes actually. So usually, this is just a cool little thing, is the pupil of the eye is above the corners of the eye normally. And the top of the eye is usually obscured in most people's eyes, though that does look a little bit tired. While the bottom of the eye is usually touching or whatever. So that's not actually the best because I've kind of drawn it in a super stylized way. But you'll miss the top of the eye, and you'll sort of kiss under the iris. So let's do that again. So let's say pupil, and then the corners of the eye will be da da da. Let's make it nice and wide, but do I don't know, and then let's do it like that. And so pupil, the iris is generally going to stay underneath. And typically the whites of the eye and the pupil are going to take up about the same amount of space in an eye. So this is going to be about half the width, and then these guys are going to be like quarter of a width normally. But when you have the eye turned to the side, like looking in this direction, for example, you're not going to see the bottom of this iris because it's going to like occlude, it's going to get blocked. And then you're going to see the eye, stuff like this. So you might have eyelash off here. But this is looking in the corner of the eye this way. And if you're the other way, say it's that way, and the corner of the eye is here. So let's say the pupils across here, and this is across here. That if it's looking back at you like this, you're gonna start to lose. You're gonna start to lose the bottom of this iris into the skin folds that are here and here. So that's just an interesting thing about eyes that you'll want to note, because say if you're looking at someone from the side and they, whatever, and they've got their face there, and this eye is maybe looking at you more directly, or whatever, I don't know. Like you might see the bottom of this eye for this one, but you won't see it for this other one because it's more turned. So that's just an interesting thing about eyes is pupil is usually above the corners, and the top part is normally occluded, like it's usually blocked off, and the bottom part, it's usually just touching the bottom of the eye or going to those sides and so forth. Another cool thing, a cool tip about the face is that with the nose, probably the most important part of the nose is actually underneath the nose. So a nose, this top part, like most people will be like, oh, the most important part is like this line across here that comes to the peak of the nose. But that's not actually the important part, because there's not a lot of light variation all the time on that part. But usually the bottom plane of the nose is somewhat in shadow because it's facing down and away from light. And so just understanding that you can draw a nose with just the bottom plane of the nose is super helpful, because then you can stylize however you want, like whether you want to put like a thing for the bridge of the nose, whether you want to put like a line coming down, whether you want to um, do like a little, oh, there's a little peak on the nose, and then they have like the nostrils here. Whoa, like, and then, oh, maybe we're looking from underneath so we can actually see the nostrils this time. And then there's this sort of thing here, like, however complex you want the nose, just understand there's a bottom side, like an underneath cliff part, like, oh, this little cliff under the nose, and then there's like there's a top part of the nose. And so this one's facing up, this one's facing down. And so you generally always see the bottom plane of someone's nose, even if they're looking at you straight. So it's going to look weird if you just draw a nose like this or something, like, oh, I'm just seeing the top of the nose. That's really weird. You've got to draw in the bottom. It's going to make it look so much more better. Yeah, so look at things and start to break them down into their forms so that you can sort of then adjust those forms. You want to look at like the measurement and say, oh, this measurement is this angle and it is this long compared to this thing that I see is this long, and you just want to kind of like start measuring. You can use your pencil. So you can use a pencil and you can look at things, and so long as you keep it consistent with your thumb sort of marking the spot, you're like, oh, so this is this long, and then you slip your thumb down and you're like, oh, this one's this long, so it's about half the size of this other one. And you do the same thing with rotation of the pencil. So you rotate the pencil and you can say, oh, this is 45 degrees. Like you're looking at it and you might be tilted or sitting slanted or something, but if you use a pencil, you can be like, I've put the pencil at the angle. Now, what is the angle? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it in between? Is it this one? And then you can just, from looking at the pencil angle, you can say, oh, it's actually this specific angle, and you can draw that angle nice and lightly on the pad in order to figure it out. Now, the difficult thing with measurement and learning measurement, which is going to take you at least a week to learn how to do, is there's three different types of measurement. One is just by eyeing it, like you just eyeing it. That's called sight size. Sight size. You look at something and then you reference it back in your head and you say, oh, that's a 45-degree angle, that's a curve, that's half the length of this thing, so on and so forth. That sight size, that's just using your eyes. There's another thing where you are using an aid, um, which is like using the pencil. Like I said, you use the pencil and you use like your thumb to figure it out. And you're like, yep, that's this one. And then this one's half the size. This one's like a third the size. And that'll help you get like the ratios. So you just use ratios. Uh, and then you can also select angle as well. So angle as well, this one. And then there's something called triangulation. Triangulation. What triangulation is you create like a triangle between different components in order to say like, oh, this thing is this length, then I go down this much, and then it goes to here, and then there's a triangle here that is like this long, which does this, which then allows me to create this other angle. So you use angles and ratios to fix certain sides. Now, the problem with this, and the problem with all measurement, is that when you measure, there's going to be a degree of error. So let's say you can measure perfectly well up until this point, and there's going to be like a range of error. It's like, I don't know, like this 5% minimum sort of error ratio that you're going to have in your lines, the angles that you create, whatever. You're going to have these slight errors. Well, if you create slight errors, let's say in a box of about this much, then if I have a vertex here, and then there's a vertex here, then there's a vertex here, then there's a vertex here, this is not going to be a correct box. And so what will happen when you're drawing something complex, which has lots of potential for error, you're going to have these slight little variations which are going to make it so that, oh, if I go from this point, I think this is correct, and I go to this point, yeah, I've got that line right. And then you measure that line compared to this line, and you're like, wait, and then maybe you're going to get that wrong. And then you're going to go over here. It starts to compound. You start to get not just this much error, you start to get this much error. And so something like this part of it over here will be way off. Like the distances will be way off. And so certain parts of like a drawing will be like really pinched in, and other ones will be really extended, way more than they should be. And you'll be like, well, why did I draw so badly? Why did I measure so badly? The thing that you want to understand about measurements is that you can get this so that they all support each other. So that this error ratio actually gets smaller, this one gets smaller, and then this one gets really accurate. And the way that you do that is don't just think of this line to this line, think of them all together. If you think of them all together, they start compensating for each other. And then you're like, oh, wait, so this one's got to adjust like this. So you think in a relative way. Because it doesn't matter if, say, for example, we're drawing a square and all the lines that we draw are on the inside like this. this is still going to be an accurate box compared to what we want to draw, compared to, say, this one that's out this way. Like, yeah, these are two possible versions of the box, just drawn at different scales. But if you're just drawing line to line to line, you're going to be drawing like, oh, this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and it's going to be very, what I would call undecided. So there's a decision-making process when measuring. And you want to basically think of it like you're going to miss to a certain degree, but you want to confidently miss so that you can just be like, oh, we'll take the larger one, we'll take the smaller one, whatever. Like, whatever it is, okay, we're going to confidently miss, but we're going to mostly get it right because we're keeping everything sort of relative to each other. And this is a big part of measurement, is not getting this compounding loss and instead using a sort of accumulative accuracy, which is the biggest part of measurement. Once you understand this about measurement, you'll be able to measure by sight size. You'll just be able to use your eye, look at a thing, and then be able to copy it. And copying a thing is just a combination of lines and measurements, and also understanding the forms that shape that thing. So you'll be like, oh, so the forms are doing this, the lines are doing this, and the measurements are these. And then you can put that together and you can draw pretty much anything, at least so far as the general shapes, outlines, and so forth. Your shadow, this gets us to what I was describing at the start, which is, where is it? Well, here. So the time frame of drawing from reference is about 1 month to 3 months, which is just what I described. So if you're capable of doing forms, boxes, 3D forms, you're capable of constructing them together, rotating them, and that sort of thing, as well as drawing lines at the right angles, um, understanding the measurements and controlling those measurements. If you spend time on just those things and you get really fluid and confident at that, you're going to be able to draw from reference. That is just an absolute guarantee. And this is actually that's the end point of this. So what I'm going to now go on to is more advanced stuff, like intermediate stuff. Actually, before I do, I'll go on to mental stuff a little bit, okay? So the mental part of drawing. We've just understood the physical and how to basically get to the first stage of drawing, which is copying. You will be able to copy things like cute little mangas. They'll be able to look exactly like professionals do them. You'll actually be able to get work in industries doing that, like in animation industries and stuff, because you can copy accurately, you can make things reasonable. Um, you won't have any artistic capability, but you'll have copying capability, which is useful, and it's the first skill that you want when you're drawing, because if you're going to be a painter or a sculptor, being able to understand three-dimensional forms, angles, combinations of curves, things like that, they're going to give you, and how to control those things physically, that's going to give you 90% of the fundamentals of all drawing and all painting and so on, so that you can set everything up. And from there, you can learn the artistic part of things. But there is also a mental aspect to drawing. So I'm going to go over a few mental things here. So I'm going to start with the simplest thing mentally, which is controlling your eye, which is being able to look at things and break it down into its lines, its forms, and measurements, ratios. So we talked about that. That's one mental thing. There is another mental thing when it comes to drawing, which is, let's start with anxiety. Um, so, I mean, drawing is a very calming act, but the anxiety of not being good enough is really big. For most people, they're like, oh, yeah, but it's really bad. Look, if you can copy something really accurately, your anxiety is going to decrease a lot. So don't worry about that too much. But your anxiety is going to be there because you think, well, what is possible? And am I lazy? Am I not doing enough? Am I blah, 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 and so forth. Anxiety is combated in art with levels of confidence in your choices. Your choices. And choices are a big, big, big part of art and design. So some people will say, oh, there's an error in this thing. Oh, there's an error in that thing because you didn't draw it perfectly. Copying is not art, it's just the fundamental starting block of it. So if you're getting something, what people say is wrong, it could be just a result of your choices. So don't allow people or your doubts to make you question your choices. If you're specifically choosing not to spend effort on a part of a drawing, that can be part of a choice. And you're going to have limits that you're working within. So you have working limits. So when you're a beginner, your working limits are much more reduced. So say, let's just mark this in apples. We say, okay, we've got one apple of effort, and then we've got two apples of effort or something. So we're starting off when we only have one apple to spend of effort, uh, or whatever. So maybe we can use that on measurements and form and the stroke language we use, like the turns that we use and all that sort of stuff. And we can use one apple and we can do this. If someone comes in and says, oh, you're just copying, stop copying, you're so bad, whatever, this can cause anxiety because then it can mess with your choices. And the truth is, your working limits are just like, yeah, I can spend an apple to do these things, but they're asking me to use two apples to come along and then draw something with stylization. So, for example, if we have a sphere or something, and it's like, oh, here's the sphere. I want you to draw the sphere, but I want you to stylize it. Like, oh, okay, I'll draw a sphere stylized. Here's my sphere stylized. Like, yeah, that's my stylized sphere. Or, oh, I'll stylize this sphere in a different way. Oh, you know, it's got chunks out of it and like a crater here. Like, yeah, look at this sphere. This is a sphere, but I've stylized it. Woo! Like you could copy something directly as the way it is, or you can add elements, subtract elements, stretch elements, and add stylization. You could look at things and say like, oh, okay, he said draw a sphere, but he didn't say what else I could draw. So I'm going to draw a sphere, and then I'm going to draw like a little dude that like is looking at it, which makes it a big sphere. And he's like, oh, so there we go. We've just added scale into the drawing. And now it's a different kind of sphere that's maybe a little bit more interesting. Or, oh, they said a sphere, but they didn't say it couldn't be set on fire. You know, whoa, it's on fire. Whoa. Oh my God. So you're like, yeah, I drew a sphere, but it's like a burning sphere. And so these are stylizations. So maybe this takes a second apple for you to use to be able to do that. And then maybe you're like, oh, but I don't really like this flame. I want like a different flame. Well, that might require like a third apple investment of energy. So you're going to have limits as an illustrator as to how much you're going to be able to do with your energy sort of budget. And while you want to be able to do like these basics all the time, nice and efficiently, you're going to be working within limits. And your anxiety is going to be connected to other people saying, have infinite limits. You're not going to have infinite limits. You're never going to have infinite limits. You're always going to have to control and budget for how much limits you have. So, a film director has a limit of how much money they can spend on CGI or specific scenes or actors or the time frame that they have shooting. So, they're not going to be able to get perfect shots. They're not going to be able to get all the things that they need. They have to confidently guess at what budget they can spend on something to get it right. And you're going to be the same as an artist. And this is what's connected to your anxiety is your working limits. And you're going to have to make choices, proud, confident choices as to what your working limits are focused on. Everyone else is going to think they know better. And when they know better, they're going to make you anxious. And if you believe in that, you're going to use your working limits to try and impress someone else. And then you're going to be sacrificing something else that you could have been doing. So understand working limits and understand that your anxiety is a result of natural limitations. When you start, you're going to have just some reason, like you're going to have very low working limits. But as you expand, you're going to get more working limits. And I'm going to explain to you how to actually gain working limits now. So we just explained the working limits as apples, right? So we've got this cute little apple. Maybe give it a shine. There we go. And this is what we start with. But say eventually the goal that we have is something so complex that it requires like I don't know, like however many apples, like this many apples. So it requires a whole bunch of apples, but you only have one. So how do you get from here down to here, where you have tons of apples? Well, there are things, there are properties, properties of drawing, properties. Let's say there is speed, there is strength. You can create whatever properties you want if you want to. Don't worry about that. And there's fitness. Speed is like, oh, okay, so there's an angle over here, angle over here, angle over here, and then there's a thing like this, and then this one goes like this, and then there's this thing that does this, and then this that goes like this, and then this one, and this one, and then this one, this, and then this does this, and this is this. This is speed. Your speed can increase, and it's about kind of confidence. It's about like knowing what's coming next, being able to coordinate your body, your actions to do what you want in a controlled way at speed. You can just develop speed over time, and it's probably the easiest to develop. This is the easiest to get quickness and efficiency and speed. That's going to be one of your properties. And as your speed increases, this is going to like equal like you're going to be able to do multiple apples worth of energy, right? Then you've got something like strength. So strength is something is difficult and strugglesome. Like, oh, I've got to rotate this weird object, which is really annoying. And then it's got like these specific aspects to it that make it really challenging to rotate. And then I've got to like look at this, I've got to analyze it, I've got to understand it, and then I've got to be able to present it in a different way that is completely imagined. Okay, and then I've got to do this, and then it's like this, and then like this one is actually coming out, but then this is doing this. And so you might be doing these kind of like design based or redesign, or like you're thinking of new characters and you resculpting things, and it just feels heavy. And you can improve how you deal with heavy design choices and struggles, so that they become nice and light. So that the heavy things you can stop, you can slow down, you can analyze it, you can sculpt it, you can say, okay, I need this part to be related to this part, and then we're going to go specifically like here, and then there's this very precise thing that's going to do this. These are going to be heavier choices. So your speed, they don't need to be accurate or whatever, but your strength is going to be precise. It's going to be sculpted. It's going to be super intentional. While this is going to be instinctive more. And so you can develop strength by slowing down, focusing on different components relating to each other, doing things like measurement, doing things like rotations, doing things like different camera angles of the same topic. So there's things called turnarounds, like you might have a face, and then like you start turning the face, and it's like here, uh, and then it's like sideways face, you know? So you're turning the face, or whatever, like, this one looks so cheeky. Anyways, so turning faces, turning characters, maybe coming from a bottom-up shot, coming from a top-down shot. These things are going to require strength and sort of design, the ability to hold information all at once in place so that you can do more complex things is what's going to be about strength. And fitness is basically we will do task A, and then we pivot to task B, and then we pivot to task C, which is all the curves. And then we pivot to task D, which is now these little tight lines. And then we pivot to task E, which is like patterns. Now we're drawing these patterns. And you're basically connecting all these different obstacle course like behaviors one after the other, and you're changing and sweeping and altering what you're doing. So if you get really fast, really strong, really fit, you're going to be able to do all the different tasks of drawing. And basically, what this will do is it will start to increase the amount of apples that you have. So when I'm practicing, uh, there was a certain time frame where I had all the technical capabilities down, like the basic foundations. So I moved to learning these properties so that I could get speedier, stronger, fitter. And then that allows you to have a lot more resources for your working limits to expand. So once your working limits can expand, then you can draw more complex tasks or do more complex things. This would be what I would call the second phase of learning art, is just getting your capability down. So for example, if I'm drawing a manga, that is so much fitness that's required. A lot of fitness, and a lot of strength before I even draw it, in designing all the characters, and then I've got to do things at speed because there are so many of the things that need to be drawn that it requires a lot of speed, it requires a lot of strength, it requires a lot of fitness. If you're just doing things casually, you won't need these properties, but the more of these properties, the more you're going to be operating with higher working limits. So you're going to be able to do more. Like you'll have like a bigger cup at which to store goodies for you to for you to make things. Like you're going to have more creative potential, and that allows you to do what is the next phase of drawing, which is the third phase of drawing. So the third phase of drawing is what I would call exposure. So you want to get exposed to things and appreciate different art forms. The reason you do this is to understand how things evolved, why they evolved. Like, for example, abstract art, why did that evolve? What is it useful for? How can you use it in your works? Do you want to use it? So, for example, an abstract artwork can describe an emotion. So, let's say triangles and circles. You might be like, what? What's that? But that's actually a very poppy, bubbly feeling, um, realistically. While, if there's this sort of thing, uh, this is much more aggressive and swift. Um, this is even bubblier, maybe, of a feeling. So, understanding that abstract things can communicate things is super useful in understanding communication with symbols and abstracts. While realism can communicate a lot of unspoken things. So, for example, the realism of like an eye, like some specific glint in the eye. I don't know, like let's say there's this glint or this glint that you're adding into the eye, and maybe there's an eyelid thing there, and I don't know. So adding realism can add extra depth um, and more aspects that you can alter and control, which can change the identity of the eye. Um, so you might have the realism, which changes an identity, but you might have a simpler form of an eye, which is just like, oh, we want to draw our eyes like this, and then we want to like be, let's make it bubblier. What the fuck? Um, so we want this to be bubbly, and you're like, okay, so the design of the eye is kind of like this, and then, oh my God, shows that I haven't drawn for like a month. You're just creating, I don't know, just a specific design, and you're like, oh, this cartoon design, I want it to have this triangle in it, and I want this triangle in it, and I want this to be a circle, and this to be a circle, and I want this to be just a straight line. Like you're choosing specific whatever, and this is not abstract, but this is more symbolic or geometric. So understanding the different ways you can express things and stylize things to express emotions is super important. Or understanding the evolution of art. So abstract was one of the things that came later. One of the very first things that people were getting at was realism. But by the time realism was good, I mean, before realism, there was actually stories. So you have hand painted art in caves. You have sculpted like flutes and musical instruments, so forth. These things help with stories. And so the early forms of art are just like specific pictures of things, like, oh, Christ's resurrection, or I don't know, whatever, so that people could point at the picture and then explain their story, and it was like a visual aid, or a decoration, and so forth. Like in Rome, they were really big on creating like cloth and clothing as like status. So the cloth and the clothing and status was often in their sculptures and their paintings. And they had like this really unique way of describing clothing. Um, and this was all as a kind of like visual aid to give like status and like beauty or whatever. And then you get to realism where people are trying to like depict who they are. Like, oh, I'm this baron and I'm a super important guy, and everybody in my ancestry needs to know who I am so their legacy is kept. Like the stories might be for like super figures like kings and biblical stuff like religion, and then it was like, well, I'm a rich guy, I think I'm like a god, so we need some legacy stuff, so paint me a realistic picture so I can look like everybody can look on my greatness. People did that, and then they'd like introduce some of like this cloth from Roman stuff and then put it back here, and like there'd be an interplay of like realism and some cultural influences from different countries, and it would work back and forth. And then eventually, after realism, there was a kind of there was impressionism, which is when, there's photographs and other things. There's been enough realism that's been done, so people started to change things that were realistic and make it feel more real. And so instead of having a crisp edge on like the side of a face, it might be that you skip certain parts because they're kissing the light, and then there's like wobbles and stuff. Because when you perceive things, you don't perceive them with crystal clear clarity. You perceive them with like little alterations and wobbles and imperfections, and then your mind fixes it. So, um, Impressionism kind of makes it blurry enough, or soft edges and things like that, so that it's not just all hard edges and whatever and explicit, whatever. It's more of a journey of figuring out what it is, like figure out what it is. Like a hazy, like watching a sunset, you don't see that every specific cloud is in a specific position. You just sort of go like, oh, that's dazzling. There's dazzling sort of a splash here, a splash there, or this here, or that there. That's impressionism. Is you don't take in all the details that seriously. So why draw it that seriously? Don't. Um, so realism started going on the out, and impressionism started coming on the in, and then there was expressionism. Why am I wrong? It's not expressionism. What the? Oh God. Well, there's another one that comes after impressionism. Maybe it is expressionism. No, there's a different name. I'm just mentally blocked. Okay, so there was another one, and expressionist. No, it's expressionist. Or is it something else? It might be something else. But things like Van Gogh, um, uh, oh, I'm spelling his name wrong. Sorry, butchering everything. Where you might have like wavy lines and there's like a rhythm to like things like, oh, there's this bending tree and then the grasses, there's like rhythm that like they're all sort of bending and twisting and rotating while this thing, what is this thing? I don't know what that thing is. Has like a rhythm itself, and then there's like clouds, but they're swirling like this, and so it's like capturing this swirly energy or whatever, right? And you've got this tree which is like doing its thing, and maybe that branch is bending, and you're doing this expressionist type thing. And so painters started drawing or painting things that were not just soft edges, but started to go into the realm of how we imagine things are. Like, oh, that's a swirly thing. That's like a super soft thing that's bending. This has like loads of rhythm in it, so I'm going to express that. And you might express it a bit more flatly to help it come across to be a bit more understood. And then eventually from expressionists, we went into things like cubism. So cubism was like, blurp, blurp, you have like a cube that way, and then it's like, oh, but then there's like a cube at a different perspective going back this way. And then, oh, but wait, let's have another one, but it's kind of bent like this. And this one is coming down this way, while this one is coming up. And yeah, it's just coming up. And like then there's this cube that goes across, and then there's an underside to this one. But this one is, I don't know, going back the other way. And so you'd create like these weird cubist things that that are meant to evoke information. But these days we use things like cubism for architecture. Like, oh, okay, so then we'll just turn this into, I don't know, let's say an opera house. Whoa. And then, there's like an entrance in here, and this has this, and I don't know, and this is doing its other thing. And so playing with perception, um, you also have other different art forms like, what is it? You have things like ready-made. There's things called ready-made art. Ready-made. Like a guy will take a urinal, like there's a urinal, or girl, take a urinal, there's like a urinal, blah, da, 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 and it's like dirty or whatever. It's like a dirty urinal, and it has like I don't know, a trough there or whatever. And they will turn it on its side. Do, do, do. And they'll call it fountain. And so the idea is that changing the angle or the orientation or the context of something can change it into art. So, oh, this is a fountain. It's because the context has changed in which you're describing something, it changes the thing that it is. Or you would have other art, which might be like a painting, and it says, whoop, and it's a pipe, right? Looks like a pipe. And it says, this is not a pipe. This is not a pipe. You might be like, that's so ridiculous. But the point of this as art was that essentially it breaks the fourth wall, where your perception and the context is impacting things. Like, this isn't a pipe, it's a drawing of a pipe. It's a representation of a pipe. It's not actually a pipe. But when you look at it, you're like, it is a pipe. So mentally, you're not making the distinction of that separation. Like, you could have an anime person that's just drawn or whatever, I don't know. Like, whoa, anime person, whoa. And you could watch a whole film and just say, that is this person. Like, let's give him a name. Like, let's say it's mm, Miyazaki. So this is Miyazaki, and you're watching him for like an hour, and you're just like, that's Miyazaki. This is not Miyazaki. It's a picture of Miyazaki, a representation of Miyazaki. It is because of the context changed into whatever you believe it is, right? Like, it's not a toilet, it's a fountain. Because we've said it's a fountain, and so it's become a fountain, because perception is as much part of art as the actual thing that's drawn. And so we've gone from things that were stories, and then we've slowly progressed to realism, then we've gone into impressionism, then we've gone to expressionism, then we've gone to things like ready-made, and we've gone to cubism, and then we've gone to things like ready-made stuff, like this is not a pipe. Further explorations to help you understand that there are different contexts, different facets of art, different ways that they relate to each other. Um, let's say you have expectations of what art is, right? You're starting at point A. You're looking in this direction. Like, you're just standing there and you've got your hand up and you're looking in that direction. And you see all the way to a horizon and you think point B is where everything goes. Well, sometimes what happens is there's like a little L turn or a little veering off. And all of a sudden you end up here. You're like, how did I get here? And then you're looking down and you're looking at C over here. And this is a completely different thing. And then you might take another turn. Well, and that ends you up looking at D, which is a different part of art. And so when you're designing something or when you're creating something, you might think you're going to B, but then you might actually be going to somewhere much more complex, like over here in D, or you might take a stop in C and then move to D and then move to like some other thing, which is like E up here, which is literally up or in many different dimensions or whatever. So what we just described with art, how it takes to realism, then it goes to impressionism, then it goes to expressionism, then it goes to like cubism type stuff, then it goes to like ready-made art and abstract art and that sort of thing. They are different fragments, different facets of the complex nature of what art is that helps you explore and understand what the potentials are, what the possibilities are. So when you have your little fruit and you have enough little fruits that you can spend on art, then you can be like, oh, I'll use one for the A to B thing, and then I'll use another on this thing over here for D because I know that that exists. And then I want something for C, which is over here, and we'll spend like a fruit on that. Time, effort, work limitations, those are the things that I want. And so you'll start to plan um, based on what your perception of art is. So your perception of what is good art or what possible things you're exposed to, that's going to change your plans. That's going to change what art you create, what kind of things you create, what kind of emotions you start to portray and how you portray them. You could portray them with expressionistic things, impressionistic things. You could portray them with cubism, and you could portray them by playing with perception and context. You can shift things, alter things, and change them in different ways. And if you have the properties like the strength, the speed, the fitness, uh, and your working limits are wide enough, you can budget for these kinds of things and then fold them into your art. Now that we understand that, I want to explain another thing, which is I call proficiencies. Proficiencies are small pockets of ability. So, say something like shadow. You can express shadows in, there's something called cell shading, which anime uses. You can do it in realistic ways. You can do it in ways that are similar to photography. Like that, what they use in movies and in certain photographs and things of that nature. You can stylize it as well. You can stylize shadows to have different thing. And so you're going to learn shadows, but you're going to have to select like a proficiency within that you're going to learn. And then you go like, okay, I'm going to tackle cell shading, but I'm going to tackle it similar to X, Y, Z examples to meet my goal. So you'll spend some time because you've already got the basics, the foundations, whatever. You'll say, I'm going to do something in shadows. I'm going to do something with cell shading. I'm going to tackle it so it's similar to these reference examples or similar to this feeling I have in my imagination. If it's from your imagination, it's going to be harder. But if it's from someone else's reference that's already done it before, it's going to be easier. I personally want to do things from imagination, but you might enjoy doing things from reference. And so you should do whatever you like in regard to that. Or you might say, oh, I want really stylistic shadows. I want to push the boundary. I want to do it like a way that nobody's done it before. And so you might have to go out and see what's been done before so that you're not repeating stuff. But you'll be like, oh, okay, so the shadows, I want them to be really elongated. Like, and then I just have like a small figure and like maybe the shadows are gonna like be multiple or whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stylize my shadows to look this way. And you're basically customizing things, but you gain proficiency in like an aspect of shadows, and then after you've developed that, you have that kind of thing. Another proficiency might be in light, or it might be in color. So color. And then it's like, well, what template are you using? Because you can use really bright templates, super saturated, You can use really bleak ones. You can use really subdued. And using different color palettes are going to give you different results. So maybe you want like, oh, I want a painterly. Um, I want to understand how to use painterly color palettes. Or maybe I want to do something that's more realistic. So you'll start exposing yourself to like different aspects of how these proficiencies can develop. So, and then you'll be able to pick based on your working limits what one you're going to select, which one you're going to focus on, which one you're going to do, because you're not going to be able to get every single thing down. You're not going to be able to understand every single thing of drawing. You're going to have to pick and choose and select. And oftentimes, these projects or these proficiencies, they take a certain amount of time and they take a certain amount of directed focus. Directed focus. And you can really only do this when you have the properties necessary. Like you need the properties first, like you need the strength and the speed and the fitness to be able to put your directed focus into like doing this specific thing. Otherwise, it's just going to tire you out. You're not going to be able to do it. You just don't have the working limits to learn this proficiency. But once your properties are high enough, you can learn the proficiencies and you can just go out, select a thing, learn a thing. Like I do things sometimes called short studies. I'll just sit down and I'll be like, I want to learn something about hair. And I'm like, okay, but I can start by understanding, like, oh, there's this section of the hair, there's this section of the hair, there's this section of the hair, then there's like the fringe section of the hair, and then there's like another back side section of the hair, then there's a back section of the hair. And, often this comes in like some sort of symmetry. So there's like this can break off this way, this can break off this way, and then this has height to it because it's got to come up before it goes down. There's like volume. And so then there's this hair that's got to come off here that has volume. And then when it comes down here, it's got to push off to the back. And then you've got back hair, and then this one's might be coming off like this or whatever. And there might be like flicks off here. And so there's like the ear that it has to contend with. And then there's stuff like flicking off the back. So you just start to understand and break down the thing that you're drawing and start to understand how it works. And those could be things like short studies. You could do things where you get references and you copy them. Basically, if you copy a drawing, you will start to understand more about it because you'll start to be observing more and more and more about it than a normal person would. Because you're observing all the angles, you're observing all the qualities of it, you're observing all the natures of it. Like for example, when I started studying eyes, to draw eyes, I came across this understanding that one of the most important parts of eyes is actually not the eye at all, but this portion just outside the eye. This part here. Like it's just outside the eye, but it's like this really beautiful part of the eye that if you represent it right, uh, it creates like a lot more beauty in the eye. So I was like, oh, the section just outside the eye is like super, super pretty. And people don't often know that. Like the inside of the eye, that's super deep. That's where the darkness comes in. And then like outside on this side, there's like this fat pad that kind of is very rounded and often hits a lot of light. So it'll be darker on this side, but then there'll be like a lot of light shining on this side. And like you'll have light shining on this, and then maybe it's darker on this inside of the eye. And so you start to notice like different little things when you take something and you study it intentionally. and you put directed focus on it and you just start understanding it. You can pick it apart, take pieces of information, and then gain little proficiencies, understandings, and so on. Okay, so that's a really simplified way of viewing art in these, like phase one, which is literally just foundational capacity, right? Phase two, which is just kind of like properties, how strong you are, or whatever. You could say it's your attributes. And then phase three, this is like your working limits, right? Working limits. And then phase three, exposure. This helps you make better choices. Okay, so that's a good place to start, a kind of all-in-one. And I hope that helps you on the drawing journey. Just start with the basics and then go from there. All right.